across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
I know. I said at 1 o'clock, I'm back on at 11. And as you can see, it is 10 o'clock. And as I said yesterday, this is as much a surprise to me as it is to you. So anyway, we've got that extra hour back. You couldn't make this stuff up, but there you go. Here I am, and I've got a fully packed show for you, because that is what is required. We've got Talk Back at midnight, don't forget. That is your chance, literally, to talk back. And what I want to talk to you about is about jury trials. Now, I've put off talking about this up until today, because a lot of it was speculation, and in the last sort of week or so, a lot of it was kite flying, a lot of it was all of that. And I wanted to wait until something was actually done, because I couldn't believe that our Deputy Prime Minister, David Lammy, there was a part of me that thought, nah, this isn't going to happen. This is just nuts, right? To strip jury trial from the British people, which is a right of ours, to just remove that. Just to say, who gave him the authority to remove a right that we've had for 800 years? That's why I didn't really quite believe that anyone would be so audacious. I did not think that anyone would literally just say, yeah, do you know what, we're going to take away jury trials, but for the most important and serious crimes. And a lot of people are very upset about this. In fact, I personally, again, I don't think it's going to make it through both houses, because it is a fundamental right for you to be able to choose a jury trial. And jury trials only make up 3% of all trials. So it's really quite ridiculous for David Lammy to suggest that this, getting rid of jury trials in most cases, will speed up the system. I tell you what, I want an efficient legal system and justice system, but the idea of having a fast legal system, I don't want fast justice. I want justice. I want proper justice. I want people to be able to stand and defend themselves. I want evidence to be shown. I want 12 people, ordinary people, because then it means that if you remove juries, then my fear is you then remove the level to which the police have to get in order to prove that it's a crime. That's what concerns me. If it's just a judge, is that going to lower the bar for cops to have the evidence to take you to court? So there's lots of things to discuss here, but I just wonder whether you think there should be. I think there should be a referendum at the very least. This is one of those things that he should put to the people, because it's our rights that he's taking away. So that's what I want to talk about at midnight in Talkback. So please do give me a call if you've ever been to court, if you've ever been to magistrates' court. Would you trust a judge on his or her own to deliver justice? All of these questions, and there'll be many more of them through that I'm certainly in the next sort of half an hour or so, for you to ruminate on. I think this is a really interesting conversation, but I held off because I thought, no, surely not. Anyway, here we go. 03444991000 is the number that you're going to need. Calls are charged at the national rate, but we do call you straight back. And you can text the word talk and then apply your message to 87222. So I'd love to hear from you on that topic. Also to let you know that John Boothman, our lovely Scotsman, will be here for the full hour going through the papers. Because Scottish law, of course, it'll just be England and Wales that don't have it. Anyway, we'll talk to him about Scottish courts. We're going to be talking about pubs. We all love a pub, right? We all love a pub. Well, we've been warned today that the end of the pub is nigh. The end of the independent pub is very much on its way, and pubs have suffered so much in recent years with the smoking ban and lots of other things that have gone on, and pubs are struggling, and things are now worse since the budget. So we're going to be talking literally about pubs and how we want to save our pubs. We're also going to be looking at Ukraine and Russia's latest after that meeting that has been going on in Moscow, and also after Putin said, I'm ready for war if Europe is. So there you go. We'll be chatting about that with Keir Giles. But first, let's turn our attention back to the idea that the Justice Secretary, David Lammy, has announced that jury trials in England and Wales for crimes carrying a likely sentence of less than 3 years are going to be scrapped. The reforms to the justice system are part of the government's plan to tackle delays in the court system. Serious offences, including murder, robbery and rape, will still go before a jury, but sexual assault, having porn or child sexual images on your phone won't. That'll be considered a lesser crime, and therefore just go to either a magistrate or a judge. Volunteer community magistrates, who will deal with the majority of all criminal cases, will take on even more work. So is that the solution to cutting time between being charged and actually seeing the inside of a court? Well, joining me now is Stephanie Needleman, who's Legal Director of Justice, a legal reform charity. A very good evening to you, Stephanie. Thank you for joining me. I mean, I think even a layperson can look at the justice system and say, yeah, it's probably creaking, it probably needs something, but is this what it needs? Is this going to fix it?
Well, good evening, and thank you so much for having me on. I was obviously listening to the introduction that you just gave there, and it absolutely baffles me that at a time when public trust in our institutions is at an all-time low, and the government is deciding to get rid of the most trusted part of the criminal justice system. There are various polls which show that the jury system that juries are much more trusted than judges. It's essentially taking power away from people and giving it to a smaller number of people within state institutions. Absolutely, our criminal justice system is in crisis. There's a huge backlog, almost 80,000 cases in the Crown Court. But I would agree that this is absolutely not the way to deal with it. There are other solutions which don't involve getting rid of an institution that, as you said, we've had for 800 years and is important for a number of reasons. It's important for civic engagement. It helps solidify that social contract between citizens and the state by getting people to participate in an absolutely critical part of the justice system and brings people together from all different backgrounds. It also reduces the risk of individual error. You have 12 people with different experiences bringing that to bear on serious criminal cases versus a single judge.
And you've got those 12 lay people, which is really important that they are scrutinising evidence that can sometimes be complicated. And that's one of the excuses they use, isn't it? Well, it's too complicated for these silly little people, so we'll just get a judge to do it. But actually, that scrutiny is important because it makes the prosecution have to explain why this is important, and they have to reach that bar of evidence. And that, as you heard in my introduction, that really concerns me, is the idea that the bar could be lowered on evidence on the basis that, we don't need to explain it to those, pitiful, ordinary people.
Absolutely. I mean, if a case cannot be put in a way that is simple for everyday people to be able to understand, then something is going wrong with that. And we know that the reason that cases aren't heard or aren't tried properly, it's not to do with juries. It's to do with other things such as case management, such as cases that are not going to be heard for various reasons, not being dropped at an earlier stage. Only 2 out of 5 cases actually get to a jury trial as planned. So I think what we really need to be looking at is what's happening with those 3 out of 5 cases that are not getting to the trials because they're not ready or because there's a last-minute decision to drop the case.
Now, at the moment, you have the right, as a British citizen, to request a jury trial. So if you've been convicted of a criminal offence, such as theft, right, that reaches a certain bar, they can suggest you go in front of a magistrate, or you can choose a jury. A lot of people will be saying, well, that does seem to be a bit silly. If it's just somebody who's nicked a couple of bottles of whiskey, then the fact they get a jury and it makes somebody who's waiting for a rape case or a murder case to go forward in the same queue, then that's why this is a good idea to sideline those people away from having the choice. What would be your argument to that?
Well, as you recognise, there's already the vast majority of cases, the less serious cases, are already tried in the magistrates' court, and there is no right with those cases to elect to have a jury trial. So the vast majority of lower level criminal offences are already dealt with in exactly the way that's suggested. There are arguments for making certain offences that are low level, such as low level theft, for example, that currently can be tried in the Crown Court with a jury, for making those only triable in the magistrates' courts. However, 3 years is quite a serious threshold.
Yes, it is.
As you mentioned, there are lots of sexual offences that would have a sentence potentially of 3 years. Some lower level terrorism offences, some violent burglaries. We're not talking here just about nicking a bottle of whiskey from a shop.
Yeah. No, and that is the problem, isn't it? When we look at other systems, though, particularly across Europe, many European countries have a system that works perfectly well without juries. What would be your concern about this sort of middle-level court that would be heard just by a judge?
Yeah, well, as I've already mentioned, juries put public trust into the criminal justice system. They're the most trusted part. I'm very concerned that with a significant reduction in juries, you're going to cause significant undermining of public trust in the criminal justice system. Juries also reduce the risk of individual error. You've got 12 people all bringing very different experience, their life experiences as ordinary, everyday people, to decide on facts within a case. Judges, and judges have readily admitted it, they're actually not trained to make factual findings. They are trained to deal with the law, the legal bit, and they leave the factual findings to the jury. And juries are much more representative of society as a whole than a single judge. Tend to come from more privileged socioeconomic backgrounds and don't share the same lived experiences as a lot of a vast majority of the members of the public. And so I'd be very concerned about the decision making if that's the case.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, you may have somebody who's had lived a very rarefied life who doesn't understand what the person in front of him has been, or the life that they live that means the crimes occurred. But some people might go, well, that's good, because then they're just being judged on the crime that they committed rather than what led up to that crime. That's what we're being too soft on criminals.
Well, the jury's asked to make findings of fact based on the crime that's committed. There's mitigations and other things that come into play in relation to sentencing, but the findings of fact, are around the crime that's committed. And in terms of bringing life experience to bear, where that is relevant from a legal perspective, the jury is allowed to take that into account, and in some cases it won't be, and the jury won't be allowed to take it into account. One of the issues that I have with judge-only trials, which I don't think has been properly considered by the government, is, for example, that what you get in criminal cases is you get applications by the lawyers to the judge to either include or exclude various different types of evidence. So, for example, in a sexual offence case, this may involve, for example, the sexual history of the complainant. An application will be made about what can be disclosed to the jury or not. The jury isn't part of this application, so they don't hear that evidence. The judge will make a decision and then the jury will or won't hear it. A judge sitting alone will hear the application, will hear all about the sexual history of the complainant, and then will have to just put it out of his or her mind when they're making a decision.
And presumably they'll be told about previous crimes, whereas they wouldn't as well.
Well, exactly, in exactly the same way. It applies to any evidence that may, hearsay evidence or any evidence that may not be admissible normally. I'm not sure what the government's proposed to deal with that particular issue.
It's a fascinating situation. I mean, I honestly I couldn't believe it when I saw it. But listen, it's been great talking to you. Thank you very much indeed, Stephanie Needleman, there, legal director of a Justice UK legal reform charity. Well, joining me now is Liam Walker KC, leading barrister specialising in media and criminal law. I better watch what I say. A very good evening to you, Liam.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. So just talking there, the idea of this sort of middle court, if you like, the magistrates court, the criminal court, and then this middle lane that Lammy is talking about. Would there be a place in that for barristers? I mean, do we know what this would look like with just a judge making this decision?
Well, we don't know what that would look like because it hasn't said in the review, but barristers tend appear in all courts in England and Wales, solicitors, solicitor advocates in the Crown Courts and also in the Magistrates Court. So there would always be room for advocates. But I think I agree with your previous guest, which is it's the way in which the decisions are made in these courts. And David Lammy in June 2020, he said, jury trials are a fundamental part of our democratic settlement. Criminal trials without juries are a bad idea. The government needs to pull their finger out and acquire empty buildings across the country to make sure these can happen in a way that is safe. You know, it's complete hypocrisy from Lammy to be doing.
Well, I mean, and also the former KC or QC, Keir Starmer, was also a big fan of jury trials as well, and now nothing.
Well, he was, and he wrote a report for the Haldane Society seeking to expand the jury system beyond what it was. I can't remember when the report was published, but yeah, it seems to be rampant hypocrisy amongst the government, and they haven't got a mandate for it. You know, I mean, I know I'm here for to talk to give you an insight into legal aspects of it, but where was this in the manifesto?
Well, I mean, that is the point as well. And to remove rights that have been inalienable for 800 years, I would have imagined that he would have been given some authority to it, and also perhaps a referendum, since it's taking away from us. As I was saying, though, to Stephanie, there are many countries that do not have trial by jury. European countries. We're not just talking about, you know, North Korea and Russia and places like that, but there are existing legal and justice framework that seem to work reasonably well without jury. And many people will think, well, if it works for them, perhaps it could work for us.
Well, France have the inquisitorial system, that's correct. I can't speak from personal experience about whether it works well or it works badly. But I think the other thing to say is that, you know, what's the purpose of this being brought in? It's to suggest that in some way it's going to speed up justice. Well, the point here is, what is justice? The purpose of the jury system was that a citizen could be judged by their peers. David Lammy himself was the author of a review called the Lammy Review in 2017, and one of the conclusions of that review was this: BAME individuals still face bias, including overt discrimination in parts of the justice system. As of April the 1st, 2024, 86% of all judges were white. Magistrates are not paid. Judges are paid. And the reason I say magistrates aren't paid is because why are you able to make a decision on someone's life, which goes up to a 2-year maximum imprisonment, if you don't have to be paid to do the job? That is the rich judging everyone else. And it's the confidence in the justice system which the jury system gives the citizen. Being judged by your peers, at least having the pretense that the ethnic, gender and religious makeup of a jury might coalesce together to allow them to have an idea about the situation that the person finds themselves in. Because what we're talking about is not whether people are convicted. It's what if you were innocent? What if you didn't do it?
Yeah.
Because that is going to destroy your life. You don't get, thankfully we've done away with the death penalty, but you don't get another chance.
I mean, the thing is that this was brought into the Magna Carta 800 years ago to prevent the state, the jury trials, to prevent the state from having overall power over the peasants, right? I mean, that was the whole point of this, was to stop the state from just having all of that power over the common folk. Is that something that you're concerned about? Not just how it will look, but in how, in effect, it will work. That it will be an us and them situation. That there will be that huge now separation between, the us commoners and those who sit in judgment of us.
Massively, it's a huge concern, because the jury system is a check and balance on the legislature, on the executive and the legislature, so that the citizens can say, even if you pass a law and you try, which we think is unjust, and you try someone, us as the public can say no. And that's happened historically. There is a plaque in the Old Bailey to Bushell's case where a jury found someone for seditious libel not guilty, and the judge said, you'll go away, locked them up without food and water, and said, you'll go away and come back until they're found guilty. And they said no. And they went away and they were locked up, and there was a writ of habeas corpus. And that is the case which established that juries are able to follow their conscience. And it's that conscience were made more famous recently, one could say, in the Colston statue trial in Bristol.
Yeah, oh yes, indeed. Is there a concern that the bar for proving a prosecution will be lowered? That somehow police might think, well, I don't have to explain this to 12 lay people. It's a judge who kind of will understand this a bit better. Is there a concern about that?
I think it's a step too far to say that a judge would enable the police to suggest a lower standard of proof. I'm not sure that I could get on board with that, but I just don't think there's no evidence. I'm a lawyer. I deal in evidence. There's no evidence.
Yeah. No, it's just always occurred to me.
I think I'd get in trouble if I agreed with you, but what I can say is this, and it is in terms of conviction rates for the year 2024-2025. The CPS reported an overall conviction rate of 86% in the Magistrates' Court. In the Crown Court, it's less, but it's 83.1%. If the conviction rate went up because of gender-only trials, then get more prisons, because there are going to be more people in prison. And are we really going to be saving money? No, we're not. And this is what it's driven by.
Yeah, well, we can all see that. Very quickly, what would save the justice system? Do courts need to be open 7 days a week for 6 months? Is that, or a year?
Well, there's some stats. Since sitting days were restricted by George Osborne. In 2019, 25 to 50% of courts were closed. In the first year of the Labour government, that was the same sort of levels. This week alone, 10 to 15% of courts are just not open. They have sold courthouses, they've closed courtrooms. That is what caused the backlog. It wasn't even really COVID, which I heard generic rolling out today. It was a political decision to starve the criminal justice system of money and court sitting days. That is what caused it. Now what they're saying is, we'll take away jury trials, but they're not saying sitting days. The answer to your question is increase sitting days, put funding into the system for lawyers as well. That may be unpopular, but lawyers have left the system in droves. Make the court estate habitable. The court estate is an absolute disgrace. Those are the things that need to be done. I agree with Sir Brian Levison on that respect. All of it needs to be done, but restricting jury trials, there's no evidence that it would make things quicker.
Good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed, Liam. I know where to come if I ever get done for anything I do in media. Liam Walker-Casey, leading barrister specialising in media and in criminal law. Right, quick break, back in a sec.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, this is Talk and it is Petrie, and coming up at midnight it is your chance to talk back, and I want to hear what you think about having your right to a jury trial taken away from you by the Deputy Prime Minister, David Lammy. He is suggesting, first of all, he suggested that there should be no jury on any case with a burden of 5 years in prison. But he's backed down from that. They went to 3, and I think it's 2 now. It's 2 or 3 years. But still, one single person deciding your fate, a judge, who we don't know for sure, but who will be given all the details of the case, including any previous bad behaviour. Now, the reason that previous bad behaviour is never given in a jury trial is because you have to do this without prejudice. You have to look at the evidence without prejudice. So, for example, if there was a rapist up on trial and they had already been convicted of a rape, you're going to go, well, he's guilty because he's already been convicted of a rape. I don't need to hear any more evidence. He did it, right? So that's why you're not told, because until the end of the trial, because what the justice system demands is that you judge a person on the crime that they have been thrown into court for, and the police have to supply the evidence to back that up, and the evidence has to be good. in order to make sure that you come to the right verdict, right? So that's why you don't know. But will judges be told previous bad behaviour? Will they be told all of these things, which I would argue would be an unsafe trial? But there's no mention that. We don't know yet. We don't know what this could potentially look like. But the idea that we don't get the right to a jury is one that I think should be put to a referendum. Personally, I don't believe that it is it's right to strip us of those rights without asking us first. But I'd love to hear from you. Perhaps you think it's a great idea. Are you a magistrate? Have you been to a magistrate's court? Is it just simple and easy? Just get it done. Have you been to a criminal court with a jury? Have you worked on a jury? Have you been a juror? And how important do you think it is that we continue with jury service and jury trials? 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, this is Talk, and it is Petrie here with you until 1 o'clock. And coming up in the top of the hour, we have John Boothman, all the way from Scotland, who will be going through the papers. But right now, Vladimir Putin has said that if Europe wants to fight a war, then Russia is ready now. This is the background as peace talks are going on between, well, Witkoff, American Donald Trump's people, and Vladimir Putin and his people. No sign of anybody from Ukraine. In the meantime, Zelensky has said that this is closer than it's ever been. Now more than ever, there's a chance to end this war. But is that really what Putin wants? Let's discuss this now with Keir Giles, who's a senior fellow at the Russia and Eurasia programme at Chatham House and author of a brilliant book. I've read it, it's fantastic, of Who Will Defend Europe. Keir, good to see you again. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. So let's first of all deal with that statement from Vladimir Putin. Is this about separating European allies from Zelensky, from Ukraine?
That's part of it, yes. But of course, Putin has an interest in making it look as though Europe is the problem to the Americans as well, because this is a deal that the United States and Russia are trying to stitch up over the heads, not just of Ukraine, but over the heads of the whole continent. If you think back to the original Russian surrender terms, these so-called 28 points, they had things in there about this vague entity called Europe, the Europeans. It wasn't clear whether it was the EU or whether it was European parts of NATO, but they were supposed to do things to fall into line with this Russian plan, which the Americans were endorsing. And we're still more or less at that stage. The Europeans are frozen out of this just as the Ukrainians are, and there are secret talks. It seems strange to call them that when the eyes of the world's media have been on them, but talks about a secret agreement which has not been disclosed to the press or the public in Moscow to decide what happens to Ukraine.
Is Russia ready for war with Europe?
This is a really interesting question, and it's one that we've been talking about for a few weeks now, because we've seen time and again over the last few weeks an idea that Russia is going to be ready by 2030. And we were trying to figure out where this came from, and it turns out that that's when most European countries think that they might possibly be ready to resist Russia, as opposed to what Russia might be ready to do. A lot of people have looked at the way Russia has been fought to a standstill by Ukraine on land, and they tend to think that means that Russia can't actually do anything anywhere else. But the problem is, it's not just Russia's land forces that are a problem for Europe and for NATO and for the UK as well, because Russia has its navy and its air force more or less untouched, and they're the means that Russia has used to deliver damage at immensely long ranges. The raids that we see going into Ukraine are launched at ranges of thousands of kilometers, and that's a problem for the whole of Europe. Plus, of course, as soon as major combat operations cease in Ukraine, those Russian land forces can be rebuilt faster, even faster than they are at the moment, and be ready for something else.
But we know that Putin is having to go back to the Russian people to raise taxes in order to pay for this war effort. We also know he's got very wealthy sponsors, if you like, and backup plans. But really, if he has been unable to push Ukraine as quickly and as far as he thought he was going to, then how much of a threat is a land war? I completely accept the sea and air, but we're not without our fight back on those fronts either. But certainly in terms of a land war, how would that look?
Well, yes, it's true. Russia has been stopped in Ukraine, but you have to think what it's been stopped by. It's been stopped by the biggest army in Europe, which is highly motivated to fight with its backs to the wall for national survival, and the fortress belt that we keep hearing about. Those towns in the Donbass that have been fortified against this Russian attack and that have withstood it for over a decade. That's not the case if you look at any other country in Europe. Even Poland, which has thrown billions at rearming itself, getting its military ready for 21st century warfare, and is heavily fortifying the border, putting in hundreds of kilometers of tank traps and barbed wire and reinvesting in landmines. They don't, even so, have the kind of military force that Ukraine has for stopping Russia. So it would be a very, very different situation if Russia were to make a land move against a NATO ally.
This threat from him, this saber rattling that he's doing, is it enough to achieve what he wants to achieve? In other words, for Europe to back off on its demands for Ukraine, and therefore it then becomes it becomes that surrender document.
In itself, no, it's not, partly because Europe has got very used to this over time. If you think back to all of the nuclear threats that we heard so much of in 2022, 2023, the effect wore off because Russia repeated it over and over again, and eventually people got wise to the fact that this was just nuclear weapons being used as an information weapon rather than what they were actually intended for. But it's the steady cumulative effect, and of course it's the effect on audiences that are not already wise to Russia's tactics. This will be directed at the Americans as well, just as much as it is at Europe, because America has bought into these Russian threats. They bought into this idea that Russia is winning, that its victory is inevitable, and so you should bring the war to an end as rapidly as possible in order to avoid any unnecessary deaths. Now, we know that's not true. Russia knows that's not true. Ukraine, above all, knows that's not true. But the point is, they've managed to convince significant sections of the Western media and apparently the White House as well.
Well, didn't we learn that Mr. Witkoff sat down with Putin and told him how to work Donald Trump?
That's it, not directly with Putin, but yes, Witkoff is part of the Russian negotiating team, coaching them in how to sell this to Trump. So we see this referred to as a Trump peace plan over and over again, which is very misleading. It wasn't Trump's, it wasn't really about peace, and it wasn't even really a plan. But that, again, is a huge success on Russia's part, because they have put this forward as the basis for negotiations from which you have to claw back in an exercise in damage limitation, rather than starting with a clean slate and trying to achieve something workable.
Now, one of the biggest sticking points seems to be the declaration that Ukrainian land be Russian. That America, Trump is prepared, by accounts that we've read, to state, which is a huge statement, that those lands now are Russian. My understanding is that Zelensky knows that those lands are lost for now, if there is to be a peace deal, but they must be declared as Ukrainian, and therefore in sometime in the future, maybe decades, generations down the road, that Ukraine can reclaim those lands as their own. Is that, for you, looking at a potential peace deal, the biggest issue here?
There are so many different issues and so many things in those original 28 points which were absolutely fatal for Ukraine's future as a state. But this particular issue, the recognition of Russian territorial control as being legitimate, is a problem that goes far, far beyond Ukraine. Now, one international lawyer explained to me that it really doesn't matter what the United States says about Crimea specifically. They said they could recognize Wales as Russian if they wanted to, and it would make no difference in international law. But just the fact that they have accepted that a country can seize territory from a neighbor through armed force, and then it will be legitimized and blessed by the United States, would take the brakes off armed conflicts everywhere around the world, because people would see it's a free-for-all and time to go. Now, that's a huge problem, of course, not just for us here in Europe, but globally. And that is why people are so concerned about this possible move by the United States to reward Russia for its aggression.
Zelensky believes that he's got to move into some regard at the moment, because he's worried that the US, Donald Trump, will get bored, will tire of negotiations and just go, oh, to hell with you, just go, and then he will lose US support. We've already seen the way that Donald Trump treated him in the White House, and Zelensky is very much on the back foot for all sorts of historical reasons with Ukraine. But is there really an opportunity for peace in this situation, or is Zelensky in between a rock and a hard place, because he doesn't want to accept just this surrender document, but on the other hand he knows if he doesn't, then he's going to potentially and very quickly lose the support of the United States?
Well, there are two separate issues here, and one of the big questions that we're coming back to again, because let's not forget this is a very repetitive cycle. We did this before in February and again in August, is what exactly it means if the United States walks away. If Trump does get bored, if they wash their hands of it, that could be benign neglect, which is allowing things to continue with the mechanisms that have been set up for arms to be purchased from the United States for Ukraine, for intelligence support to continue, but just not attempting any further peace initiatives. That would be a bonus. That would be a good thing for Ukraine, because the United States would no longer be trying to strong-arm Ukraine into accepting Russian surrender terms. The other possibility, of course, is that the United States would withdraw all support from Ukraine altogether. That's a very different situation, and that, of course, is what Zelensky was most concerned about when he talked about in one of his nightly addresses, either having to give up our dignity or give up our strongest partner. That's the choice that they're faced with. So either way, you're faced with a huge gamble on Zelensky's part, because there's no guarantee it would go the same way it does the previous times that we went around this track. But in any case, Putin has to be interested in stopping fighting for any of this to be beyond the theoretical. And he's given no indication of that whatsoever. Every time he's been offered the terms that Russia was demanding by Donald Trump, he's rejected it because they think they can get more from fighting on than they can from freezing the conflict.
It's extraordinary. I know we'll talk again about this, Keir, but thank you very much indeed. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Keir Giles, they're Senior Fellow at the Russia and Eurasia Programme, Chatham House, and author of a fabulous book. I recommend it, Who Will Defend Europe? Quick break, back to talk about pubs.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, this is Talk and it is Petrie, and coming up at the top of the hour we have John Boothman, all the way from Scotland. Before that though, we all love a pub, don't we? We all spent a lot of time in pubs. I mean, I've worked in pubs, I've certainly drunk in pubs, I've eaten in pubs, I've been to quizzes in pubs. Pubs are an essential part of British culture, even if you don't drink, alcohol. Just going into a pub is a completely different experience to anything else. And I've travelled around the world and nobody else does a pub like we do. And they have been put under an enormous amount of pressure in the last few years, actually, not just now. COVID, before that, the smoking ban. All sorts of things that pubs have had to grow and adapt and change in order to keep those institutions that we hold so dear. I think already a pub a week is closing every single time. All of these pubs are just closing because they cannot afford to keep their doors open. But according today, there was an excellent piece written by Sacha Lord, who said, "Goodbye to our beloved British pubs. I honestly do not see how they can survive the hammer blow of last week's budget." This is part of British culture. We always hear about it, don't we? Oh, British culture is dying out. And then now it's being killed off. So to discuss this with me now is Brian Keeley-Whiting, who's Managing Director of WH Pubs in Kent. Brian, good to talk to you. I mean, the pub has been such a fundamental part of my life in various different stages of my life. And I think for most Brits, drinkers or not, they would say the same, right?
Good evening. Thanks for inviting me on, and I totally agree. I'm over the moon. You like the pub because I love the pub as well, and you know we are. And the worry is it's going to disappear. No different to that post office disappeared in the village. All those things have gone. The butchers has gone, and before you know it, you're going to lose your pub. At the moment, it seems like this government is hell bent on destroying the pub. I don't know what the agenda is. But, you know, the last budget we had was probably, in my 30 years of being involved running pubs, was probably the worst budget we've ever had in our entire lives. You know, I think you have to apologise for employing people. We employ, in the sunny side of Kent, we employ about 181 people. And it feels like you have to apologise for employing people these days because we seem to be hit by employing people all the time. And the worry is that last budget was a killer, and then the latest budget we've just had was unbelievable. You know, I think we've been gaslighted. I think we were promised reforms with the business rates, and what's happened is absolutely shocking, is the honest truth.
The thing is that the pub has had to reinvent itself more times than I've had to probably reinvent myself. You know, because of the smoking ban, you had to do different things. Like with COVID, and then there's all this outdoor space now, which is lovely. It's my favourite. And you've had to find different ways of bringing people into the pub because a lot of people are not drinking. Young people don't tend to drink as much as I certainly did when I was a young person. So the pubs are constantly having to reinvent themselves, aren't they? To appeal to different generations, if you like.
I think that side of the business, I think we enjoy. You know, we absolutely love reinventing ourselves. You can go, how far did we go back? You know, Dick Turpin was around originally, wasn't he? And you know,
he would have been a friend of mine, I'm telling you.
And so we've been reinventing ourselves for a long, long time, and let's hope we can carry on reinventing ourselves. And do you know, we find it a challenge, you know, when you hear youngsters aren't drinking anymore. So we will do something different to try and get them in and to get people in. But, you know, the social aspect, didn't we miss it during COVID?
Yeah.
Didn't we miss that? And now, you know, it's still great to see people coming out to the pub. And there's people still want to come, without a doubt they want to come, but can they afford to come? That's the worry.
I mean, the concern is as well is in a lot of villages and small towns, that is the social, that is the interaction, right? There are a lot of people who perhaps are a bit older and live on their own, or younger and live on their own, and that is where you go to meet, to you know, play a game of tiddlywinks or whatever it is on the table at that time, you know, and just to be able to be noticed, that you're still around. They are important. They're not just places to go and get drunk.
No, well, listen, you can get drunk very easy at home drinking supermarket booze, without a doubt. When you come to us, we have to monitor it. We have to make sure everybody's behaving themselves. So we are the safest place to come and drink. And just so you know, we've got loads of top trumps now. You can come and have a game of top trumps in one of our pubs, and we bought them.
Don't
back,
mention
you
the
know,
word trump to me. It's not. It doesn't. It doesn't go down well. Yeah, I mean, I love it.
Top him.
Yeah, there's loads of things to do in pub. But can you survive? I mean, this is the thing. You know, my worry is always that you're going to get these huge chains, these sort of, you know, Wetherspoon-esque type pubs that, look, I don't think I've ever been in a Wetherspoons, but I'm going to guess it probably hasn't got the heart and soul of my local. You know, actually the big boys will be able to absorb these costs at the cost of the lovely, friendly, independent pubs that everybody loves.
You're so right. I think the big boys can absorb the cost, and that independent operator is the person that's going to struggle, and that's the person that's going to go first person is going to disappear. And I'm hearing it all the time. I'm sort of member of UK Hospitality, and I'm also, I live in Tunbridge Wells now, and here I am. We're sadly Tunbridge Wells has got no water for the last 4 days. God bless them.
Well, you have to drink beer then.
Well, if the pubs could open, they could drink beer. There's a lot of the pubs closed.
Yeah,
and but the ones that and the guys, they're rallying around and helping each other. And you got pubs that can open, are bringing water for customers. You saw down in lockdown and mainly the independents were the people that were helping the NHS and doing those bits, to help people. We were out delivering and doing all silly stuff like that, but. Now the real pressure is on, and it is: can we make money? Can we survive? We don't want to. The big thing we don't want to do is put prices up, without a doubt. But unfortunately, when the prices keep going up to us all the time, there's no doubt we have to pass them on, or else we're not going to survive. And I just hope people understand that it's easy to go and get that cheap booze from the supermarkets.
It's not the same.
I think the supermarkets have become more of a competition to pubs than even the big boys. When supermarkets are saying eat in for £10 and they have the audacity to call it gastropub, the food, that they're selling. I think they're frightened we'll take a penny against them. And I think they have become the big competition for us more, and that's my worry moving forward, especially with overheads just increasing and increasing all the time.
And I mean, I'm just gonna say this. We've run out of time, but they are an exceptionally important part of getting your first job. Or
don't we give most young people their first ever job?
Absolutely. Well, hospitality is just fantastic for that, and that is a real worry actually, because the experience you get behind a bar, there's nothing that quite beats it. It's lovely to meet you, Brian. Maybe I'll see you in one of your pubs one day. Brian Keeley-Whiting there, Managing Director of WH Pubs in Kent. Right, guess what's coming up now? We are going to be going through the newspapers at the top of the hour, just past the top of the hour, with John Boothman. So please do make sure you stay where you are. And then, of course, at midnight, it is Talk Back, where we're talking about jury trials.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hi there, this is Petrie with you until 1 o'clock, and of course coming up at midnight we're going to be talking about the Deputy Prime Minister, David Lammy, seems to be hell-bent on removing an 800-year-old right from us in England and in Wales, and that is the right to a jury trial. A jury trial, a lot of people are suggesting this is the end of jury trials, full stop. He says he's going to keep juries for the worst of the worst, so murder, rape, something that's in the public interest. I don't know what that could possibly be. And that there will be a third way. There will be the magistrates' courts, which already deal with about 90% of all crimes in this country. And there's only 3.3% of all trials have a jury anyway. So the idea that getting rid of jury trials is somehow going to speed up the system, I don't buy it. But also, I don't want a fast system. I want an efficient system. I don't want justice to be fast, because that always makes me think, well, it's a bit sloppy. So we're going to have a middle type of court where a judge will make there will be no jury. There will be the plaintiff, there will be defence, and there will be prosecution, I presume, and the judge will be given all the facts. We don't know if they'll be given previous, in which case it's not a safe trial in my view, and all that maybe he or she will have too much information. Plus, when you think about it, it's easier to corrupt one person than it is to corrupt 12. So say it's a big fraud case, then what's to stop brown envelopes or threats being used against one judge? It doesn't feel safe. And the whole point of juries, the whole reason in the Magna Carta that juries were introduced, was to make sure that the state couldn't run riot over your rights in a trial, that the state didn't have final say. I mean, judges are supposed to be independent, etc. Yada, blah blah blah. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But at midnight, I want to talk to you, and I want you to talk back to me about whether you think that this is something that he doesn't have the authority to do. It certainly wasn't in the manifesto. Mind you, we know what happens to things in the manifesto, don't we? But do you believe that this is above his pay grade, that you can't just strip an 800-year-old right from the people of Britain, or England and Wales, without asking them first, without checking with them first? Nobody gave him that authority. So do you believe this is a good thing? Maybe you are a magistrate. Have you been to a magistrate's court? Would you trust a judge, a single sitting judge, to sentence you to up to 2 years in jail? Would you feel that that was a safe verdict? Or maybe you're somebody who's waiting trial, who says, look, it's ridiculous, I've been waiting so long for a jury trial, that yes, anything that will speed that up is a good idea. So I'd love to hear from you, if you're inside the system or outside the system, or have been involved in the system. Do give me a call, because I'd love to hear your views. 0344 499 1000. Calls are charged at national rate, but we do call you straight back. And you can text the word talk and your messages to 87222. So that's what we're going to be talking about. Now, we know in Scotland there is a totally different legal system. John Boothman, political correspondent at the Sunday Times in Scotland, joins me now. It's lovely to see you as ever, John. How are you?
I'm good. It's a wee bit cold here, but it's December.
And it is Scotland. I mean,
yeah, well.
Look, a totally different legal system in Scotland, but juries nonetheless.
Yeah, look, I mean, interestingly enough, in the past couple of years, we've been discussing this issue of juryless trials. Basically, the Scottish Government asked the Lord Justice Clerk, the then Lord Justice Clerk, Lady Dorian, to come up with ideas round about the whole idea of rape and sexual offences, partly because the number of convictions of those were so low, And one of the ideas that Haranda Committee came up with was the idea that they could have juryless trials for those types specifically of offences.
Wow.
And interestingly enough, after what was quite a prolonged debate, also in relation to getting rid of you know, we have had a whole other verdict of not proven in Scotland. There's 3 verdicts in court cases. They decided to go with the idea of getting rid of the not proven verdict, changing the size of juries in Scotland in terms of what majority would be required. However, they rejected the idea of juryless trials, which was quite interesting. But again, this was politicians who did this after consideration of Lady Dorian's report. So it's a kind of different area. However, it's something that's been considered. I mean, all of this is very interesting for me sitting on the outside looking in, and part of it, and we have the same issue in Scotland, though we've not gone down this road, relates to the whole post-COVID situation, the fact that you've got now a huge number of outstanding cases that are not being dealt with. And I think, you know, David Lammy certainly wants to, as the Justice Secretary, reduce those. It's a pretty radical idea, as you've said, but I mean, you know, I'm playing a bit devil's advocate here, Petrie. I mean, you know, it is the case if you've got hundreds of thousands of outstanding cases, and it's going to take years, and in some cases a number of years, for those cases to come to court. It doesn't really benefit either the people who are the victims in those cases, nor does it really benefit offenders either, that these things take so long. Hence the idea of some kind of radical solution, you know, from the Justice Secretary. I have to say, I'm bound to ask that even if they could make this more efficient and more quick, there's not enough spaces in the jails to hold the people, right, who might end up on the wrong side of a conviction from a judge. So again, whatever way you look, this is kind of quite a complex issue, and will throw up problems, whatever solution is come forward with. Look, what's happening at the moment in terms of those individuals is clearly not satisfactory. I don't know, you know, whether there's any other more piecemeal solutions can be found to do something about that. If, and again, I'm playing a bit of devil's advocate, you've got to applaud at least some attempt to do something radical to try and reform that.
Yeah, but I mean, it seems to me that with the Tories limiting the number of days that judges can sit, you do that first, right? You lift that limit and you say, right, you're all going to be, you can sit for 7 days a week to get this backlog sorted. And a lot of people are saying, of course, John, that David Lammy has got other problems on his hands, and that is that they keep releasing these dangerous prisoners. There's 2 on the lam at the moment who are dangerous, violent criminals, and there's been so many released under this government and the last one, but worse under this government, being just let out of jail. I mean, no. He should put his own house in order, shouldn't he, before he starts taking a wrecking ball to the justice system?
Well, look, you know, there are so many problems in the justice system. You know, you've just pointed out, you know, so we're now talking about overcrowded prisons. We're talking about cases not being dealt with in the courts. We're talking about huge underfunding in the system. I mean, one of the issues, you know, you mentioned that point there about, you know, judges working fewer days or whatever. One of the other things that's happening in the Scottish Parliament at the moment is a big inquiry is being carried out into public inquiries, because public inquiries cost too much and they take too long. And one of the things, it's certainly the case in Scotland, is one of the things that's interesting about this inquiry that it's thrown up is that, you know, we've got so many public inquiries, I mean, half a dozen or something on the go at the moment, that, you know, it's taken judges out of the system to go and do those for many years. It's taken senior lawyers out system to go and do those. Therefore, they're not available to do those other things, like deal with some of the serious court cases, which, like south of the border, are, you know, ramping up in terms of the number of cases that need to be dealt with. So, you know, whatever way you look, right, there's huge problems in terms of, you know, what's happening in the justice system all around the country. And it's not just a question, at the end of the day, it's not just a question of resources and how much money. We also have, you know, really kind of antiquated systems, I think, that, you know, are not fully digitised, for example.
I know the paper systems in these old prisons like Wandsworth are just actually ridiculous that everything's on paper.
I mean, you know, we were talking here again in Scotland, and you must have this problem south of the border only, what, in the last couple of weeks, for example, about the number of, the amount of police time that's spent in the courts, which means that every day, you know, you've got loads and loads of police officers who should be out doing other work, who are, well, hanging around's the wrong expression, but for some of them it is hanging around, waiting in courtrooms, sitting outside courtrooms waiting to be called or not called. The system just doesn't seem to be very efficient. And, you know, you were right at the very beginning to point out that maybe it's not quite the speedy justice just that we need, but we need courts to be more efficient.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of fast justice, it scares me. I just think, yeah, that's not what we're asking for. Efficient justice, yes. I just, the whole system just seemed to be broken, but I just wonder, John, why the first thing that you go for is the thing that strips us of an 800-year-old right. Right, that seems to me to be low-hanging fruit. Perhaps it's the easiest thing to do, I don't know, but it's always at the cost of a right of some sort to the British people.
That's where you have to make some kind of balance, right? You know, there are some things that are going to have to happen if you want to solve the problem. You know,
yeah, but why does it always come down to us losing fundamental rights?
Yeah, look, I can buy what you're saying, but I'm just saying, you know, how then can we solve this problem? And again, as I say, I think this problem is a really complex one as well. And there's all sorts, the other thing is there's all sorts of vested interests around these things, which in reality in Britain seems to stop us doing lots of things that perhaps we should have done many years ago.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. So there you go, that's what we're going to be talking about at midnight in Talkback. So please give me a call. Many countries survive on juryless trials. Why can't we? 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk and your message to 87222. I'm going to take a very quick break, but John and I will be back with the papers in just a moment.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, this is Talk, and it is Petrie here with you, and with me, John Boothman, political correspondent at the Sunday Times in Scotland. John, we'll start with the Sun newspaper, and the priciest footy ticket ever, the Great Game Robbery, World Cup fans in £1,000 rip-off.
I have to say this is not a subject that even a couple of weeks ago I thought I would have any interest in, because
oh, now you do.
Because we were going, right? We weren't going. I mean, I should add that you know, it's probably one of the highlights of my entire year, going to the game with my son and seeing Scotland. I've never seen a football match quite as exciting in this, certainly for a long time. And the utter bemusement at the end, right, as everybody who was in the crowd, both Danish, who were completely stunned, and Scottish, we just looked at each other holding our hands in the air and kind of said, what just happened?
Yeah, what?
So it's pretty amazing. No, so, I mean, this is a relevant story this week because come Friday, December the 5th, I think at 5 o'clock at night, the entire nation, or at least the entire part of England and in Wales and Northern Ireland, England and Scotland, and of course Northern Ireland and the Republic and Wales have all still got an interest, will be glued to their televisions to see what the draw for the World Cup is. We will find out whether any of those teams, the two that are through and the other three that are in the playoffs, will have the possibility of going to either, well, maybe playing in Mexico, playing in Canada, or playing in the USA. And, you know, the great thing that's happening in Scotland at the moment is I think everybody will be poised over their computers, one, trying to book flights to whatever place Scotland, in our case, is drawn in. And secondly, there's already a giant debacle, partly, I think, because it's in North America, about ticket prices and ticket charges, and the fact that hardly any tickets will be available through the system directly to fans from each of the individual countries.
I mean, it is for me. It just is that emotional, almost emotional blackmail that people so love their teams that they will spend a ridiculous amount of money. I mean, they've got to pay for visas wherever they, you know, the flights, like you said, accommodation, and then the ticket price. And a lot of people will say, I don't care how much it is. That's going to be my holiday for the next 5 years or whatever. But when you see that FIFA themselves, you know, they've got their hand in, and they're already making quite a lot out of this. The FIFA grab 30% of each resale ticket, and that's what they're talking about. They're talking about the tickets on the resale market. Sure. That seems to be a little unfair, a little ungracious.
Yeah, I think all of it is, and I think the whole thing, as I say, is a great debacle. It's going to be restrictive, it's going to be expensive, but do you know what? You know, the unbridled joy, right, that certainly I watched at that match the other week, and despite the fact that we got absolutely hammered last year in the Euros in Germany, for there will still be many thousands of. I heard Kevin Bridges making a joke on his tour of America the other day, saying, does America realise that 1 million alcoholics from Scotland are going to be there? So no, I joke, but you know, people will still go, people will still enjoy themselves, and let's hope the thing, as it should be, is just going to be one big fantastic celebration, not just on the part, a celebration of football, but a celebration of everybody else. I mean, it's a huge World Cup, this. It's the biggest ever. There's 48 teams there. There are teams, you know, from, you know, what is it, the Cape Verde Islands have qualified, the second smallest country to do so, I think they are, and Curaçao's qualified. Haiti's qualified. There are more African teams than there's ever been. It's just going to be an amazing thing. I just hope that Donald Trump doesn't come out and say he's supporting Scotland, right? But there you go.
The kiss of death. Or he doesn't ban more countries from going into America. Yeah, he better check who's on the fixtures list before he starts banning. Right, let's move on to the Times. So this is an interesting one. It's also on the Sun. Andrew loses his payout of nearly £500,000, so it's £500,000 after eviction. Now, this was the money because he paid up front some money, and then he said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to fix up the place. And so assessors went in to see what he'd done, and clearly he hadn't fixed up the place. So they're saying, no, you can't have your money back. That's fair enough, isn't it?
Well, I think so. Look, and it's going to stick in everybody's craw that he looks as if he's going to end up in some royal residence. I think I heard earlier on they're talking about a royal residence in Sandringham somewhere, and we'll need to see what the terms of that are. But it's also, it appears, it sparked another investigation about into the Crown Estate, which means that people will be able to find out exactly what other members of the royal family, what kind of deals that they may have in terms of their living accommodation and anything else that's involved. So, you know, this whole thing has led to much further scrutiny of what happens with the finances of the royal family in general.
Yeah, there's some questions about Sophie and Edward and a peppercorn rent, and they're now looking at the 20-year lease that William and Kate have just signed. But you know, the Crown Estates, yes, that there is some public involvement with that, but also, you know, these people do, Sophie and Edward do work for the country. They are working royals. You know, Anne is a working royal. William and Kate are working royals. If there's an agreement between the king and he's going to pick up the tab or whatever, you know, that's family business, isn't it?
Yeah, sure, but I mean, look, you know, one of the great things and great arguments that's arisen out of all of this is the lack of transparency around a whole load of it in terms of how much the public purse pays, how much scrutiny that Parliament actually has of any of these arrangements. And I think you might get to a situation where, you know, there will be a bit more. I don't think, you know, some people would rather there was a lot more. I suspect it'll end up with a bit more scrutiny of all of that. You know, so as I say, this story's not going away. I'm still finding it very difficult, by the way, to stop calling him Prince Andrew.
I know.
I find Andrew Mountbatten Windsor far too much of a mouthful, right? And I'm sure that's the case for a lot of people.
Yeah, it is one of those things that you're just so used to saying over the years, isn't it? It's difficult. Double tax whammy will hit millions of hybrid car drivers. Millions of drivers face being taxed twice. Oh, good. Under plans for pay-per-mile electric levy, which will also apply to cars run partly on petrol. So they'll be paying their petrol pay per mile, which is what petrol and diesel is, because the more you drive, the more petrol and diesel you buy. And then they'll also be charged for the electric part of that as well.
Yeah, that's what basically what's happened as a result of the budget. I mean, you know, people who bought electric cars, I think, probably had a pretty good deal. That now seems to be eroding a bit. I think, you know, they would argue that they were kind of sold up a false prospectus round about that these electric cars would be both greener and would be cheaper. And, well, you know, as you can see, it's sort of turning out that that's kind of not really the case, right? So that's what this is about. They're saying that these hybrid cars, which have an electric battery as well as, you know, fuel, will get charged twice, and that seems to have come as a shock to quite a few people.
Yeah, it seems to be really unfair, actually.
Yeah, sure.
You know, I mean, you know, how are they going to measure what miles you do with electricity and what miles you do with a liquid fuel anyway? I mean, I guess the car could probably tell us these days, but yeah, it sounds very complicated.
I wonder if all of this, though, is a kind of road eventually to maybe reducing fuel duty altogether, and everybody pays per mile for how much they travel.
I'm sure that is what they're planning.
I think that's where they would like to get.
Yeah.
And I'm bound to say, right, and it certainly would apply north of the border and would apply to a whole series of places in rural England and Wales and Northern Ireland, that, you know, there is a bit of, if you're being charged per mile rather than being charged, you know, it's going to be a lot more expensive, right, without some kind of subsidy or derogation or something, right, for people who live in rural areas.
Yeah.
And I think, with a scheme like that, that does become a problem. And there's also still the great infrastructure issue for electric cars, that there's a whole series of areas in the country just don't have charging.
I mean, the government, the Exchequer already makes a fortune out of electric charging on the streets as it is. But I do keep saying, look, if we're buying, the more I drive my car, the more petrol I have to buy. If my car is just parked outside my house, then I don't have to top it up with petrol. That is a per mile charge. We don't need black boxes in our cars. We don't need a per mile charge because we already pay one. But they're hell-bent on getting black boxes in our cars as well. That's what they want.
Well, I think they're just, from the government's point of view, I think what's happened over the years with the growth of electric cars is the government's lost a lot of revenue that otherwise they might have had. So somehow or other, by introducing a per mile charge for everything, right, then they can start to get the revenue up from drivers again that, as I say, I think they've lost considerably over the past few years.
Yeah, it just goes to prove that all taxation is just theft. But there you go. Right, let's have a look at the Mirror. The Hillsborough report came out. I was watching this today. It doesn't seem to have delivered very much. This report. I don't know quite what I was expecting, but the Mirror saying no justice. The 97 never forgotten, you'll never walk alone on the front there. Families of the 97 Hillsborough victims say nothing has changed after a report slammed police but said no action would be taken. It almost beggars the question why they did this report in the first place.
I mean, I've listened quite carefully to this all day, right? And people talking about it's 13 years since this investigation began, and why did it take so long? And the thing that was missing from a lot of the stories is it's 36 years nearly since Hillsborough. And I do go along with the views of the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, who said, I think recently, that this is a stain on the nation's history. 97 people were killed. No police officer has ever been charged. They are saying in this report today that 12 police officers would have been guilty of it, or at least, would have been hauled up for, basically hauled up for their role in the whole thing, including the chief constable, the match commander, and a particular chief inspector. And they would have been, subject to some kind of disciplinary stuff, but because they've all retired in their full pensions, none of that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And 97 people died. I mean, if there's anything that shows that there are huge problems in the country, it's something like this. I watched, and I would recommend this to anybody, recently, the kind of fairly new Kenny Dalglish documentary that's on, I think, Amazon Prime, which is a fantastic programme about Dalglish's life, right? I'm a football fan. He played for Celtic in Glasgow. He played for Liverpool. And one of the things that endeared him to all of the people in Liverpool when he was the manager of the club during the Hillsborough disaster, and after, he attended every single one of the funerals that took place. Absolutely astonishing. What a fantastic guy is Kenny Dalglish. And as I say, here we are, we're sitting 36 years on, and nobody's been charged with anything. And even though it's been called out in this report today, after huge campaigns and everything else, no one's going to be, brought to justice for any of that. Not even to be charged. The words I was looking for earlier were gross misconduct.
Yeah.
Of 12 police officers. It's
I mean,
pretty
it's shocking
astonishing.
for the families. It just does another punch in the gut, isn't it? That like you said, nobody has been brought to book for this, and yet there are families who are missing those 97 people that will never come back.
And the police blamed, as did politicians,
the fans,
blamed the fans, and even after all of that's been found to be completely and utterly debunked and untrue, we're still sitting here and nothing's happened.
And the son still hasn't been forgiven and never will be in Liverpool.
Yeah.
Right, let's take a quick break, John, and we'll be back in just a moment.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
And it is, and I am Petrie, and with me is John Boothman, who is a political correspondent at the Sunday Times in Scotland. At the Daily Express, John, no better time to act than now, as there are lives at stake. This is an urgent action demanded to prevent attacks against women like Sarah Everard. More lives are at risk unless urgent action is taken to stop violent sexual attacks on women and girls, a damning report has warned. I mean, I don't know what they're going to do to stop it. I mean, it's all very well saying they've got to stop. I completely agree with that. But, you know, I suppose every right-thinking person does. But what do you do?
Well, you know, Eilish Angelini, Lady Angelini, who I'm bound to say is a fantastic woman. She was the first woman and first solicitor and first procurator fiscal to be the Lord Advocate in Scotland. Until recently, she was the warden of St Hugh's College in Oxford. She was a pro-vice chancellor at Oxford. Tremendous woman whose father was had a carried coal, sold coal round the doors in Glasgow. Wow. She has carried out the second report in the wake of what happened to Sarah Everard and come up with this report. She's saying that a quarter of the police forces in England don't actually have proper policies for investigating attacks on women. She goes on to say that there is no consistency throughout the whole of the UK, throughout the whole of England about this. She wants to strengthen policing, offender management, and more preventive measures around tackling violence and threats against women. It's a very, very, very strong report that she's come up with. She carried her first report. She also pointed out some of the recommendations, and that just weren't carried out by the police, basically saying that not enough priority is given to this whole area compared to other crimes. So it's a pretty strong report and a wake-up call for the police in the country. So there are things she's suggesting. She's suggesting there could be better data and better data management and exchange, and some of the issues that that arise from this, the police could just do so much better with.
And a recognition of gender-specific violence, gender-based violence.
Sure, exactly that. But let's see, right? I mean, and again, this is, I spoke about public inquiries. This wasn't a public inquiry. This is a different kind of inquiry earlier. But, what happens with a lot of these inquiries is that they come up with very well-meaning suggestions and proper suggestions for practical action, and sometimes they just get ignored.
Yeah. I know, but that is just ridiculous, isn't it? But in Italy, I think they've just changed the law to recognise gender violence specifically against women and girls, to say that it is a form of misogyny. It is an act carried out on a person because of their gender, as opposed to just somebody happened to be there, which I think is a really, really important step. So Italy has taken that, and it's just heartbreaking, actually. The quote that I keep seeing today, and of course, as a mother myself, it just makes me just feel sick to my stomach. Is Sarah Everard's mother, Sue, yesterday told how she remains tormented because she can't stop thinking about the horrors of her daughter's final hours. And any parent would be exactly where she is, right? It's just awful. She's never, ever going to stop thinking about that.
No, that's right. I mean, anybody who finds themselves with any members of their family in such horrendous situations like this, it's a torture every day.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Right, let's have a look at the Telegraph now. This is a gift that it certainly keeps on giving. Treasury Mandarin dragged into the OBR row. This is after the OBR chief, of course, quit on Monday, and they've just decided to throw Rachel Reeves under the bus as many times as they can, it seems.
Saying that there's a letter that our remarks misled the public,
yeah,
and prompting questions over how our whole fiscal outlook was presented. It just doesn't go away. Look, this was supposed to be, at the end of the last week, a triumph for the Chancellor. One, she had to satisfy the markets, which she seemed to do. Two, she wanted to satisfy the Labour MPs, the backbenchers in the House of Commons, which it appears that she managed to do as well. One wonders, having looked at some of the polls over the weekend, how she thought she was going to satisfy the public.
Yeah, I don't think you can do both.
Yeah, well, but you're back to this situation where there's a bit of where Starmer and Rachel Reeves are at the moment, anything they do, right? It's kind of like a reverse Midas touch. And even if they do things that look as if they are things that should find favour with people, they kind of manage to somehow or other just get it wrong.
Yeah, I mean, catastrophic. It is quite a talent, really.
Yeah.
In a way. Well, I think there's more to come from the OBR. I think they've got nothing to lose now. They might as well just chuck everything out there and see what sticks. Other story here: weight loss jabs can halve number of sick days. This is as there is a call for the NHS to speed up its rollout of these weight loss jabs, not just to get NHS treatment bills down, but also now it appears that it is making people so much more healthy they don't have to take time off work.
Well, again, in the story, and I found this was very interesting, saying that I suppose this is logical, that people who are obese take more times off their work, more days off work. And I found that just like it's put as starkly as that to be very, very interesting. I don't look, I think one of the things that I'm interested in, it'll be interesting to come back to this 2 years on, after people have come off the jabs, just to see how long lasting this has been.
Very
I
true.
think it's one of these things that, you know, not just politicians, not just the health secretary are wandering around saying, this is fantastic, let's expand it and let's give it to everybody. And I'm not disagreeing with that necessarily, but I think the proof in the pudding, to use the wrong expression about a diet jab, will be 2 or 3 years down the road when we come back and look at it and say, well, actually, X percentage of the people who took this jab are still as
Yeah, I mean,
whatever.
there is a suggestion now. A lot of people are suggesting that this is would be a sort of lifetime commitment to this drug.
Yeah.
This isn't a quick fix. This is something that, you know, you'd microdose after you've got to your ideal weight, or if you started to put weight back on, you'd go back to it. So it is not. I don't know. I'm no scientist, but it's not going to be that one hit and you're done. But it does. You know, it works. We've seen it. We've seen that it works.
I think it also, though, needs to be combined with other things like exercise and stuff as well, which would probably, you know, and again, you know, part of the other recommendation that you keep seeing with either Ozempic and Mounjaro is this thing about, and this is make sure you if you are going anywhere near these, that you are properly assessed, that you know you take the proper advice, right? And I think, you know, as I say, I will be interested to see where we are in 2 or 3 years with this.
Oh, it's interesting. Another interesting side effect of these drugs appears to be, and they're thinking of using it to stop people drinking.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can see why that would be important, why that would work, and it certainly would be important. Yeah.
I mean, they seem to be thinking there's quite a few things that these drugs will do, but like you said, the long-term data is what's needed for now. I just want to pick one of your stories now, because the Metro is going with the David Lammy story. So let's pick one of yours. More than 800,000 under fives. I couldn't. Are active on social media platforms.
I couldn't believe this story, right? I mean, maybe this is just me, right? But you know, one of the things that's great about being in this part of the world in Edinburgh is that we've got a pretty fantastic bus service, and I like to go and use the bus and stuff. And I always get terribly depressed seeing, honestly, sometimes children in pushchairs with playing with their parents' mobile phones. And when I kind of nearly fell off my seat, right, this morning, 800,000 children aged 5 and under are engaging with social media. And then it goes on to say, right, you know, the restrictions, I mean, all of the numbers that are here are just absolutely amazing. What was it? It says, almost 4 in 10 parents, 37% of 3 to 5-year-olds reported that their child used at least one social media app or site, up from 29% in 2023.
I mean, this is absolutely horrific. I mean, no wonder young people can't talk to each other. You know, if they're between the ages of 3 and 5 years old, 814,000 users. Between 3 and 4. I mean, I'm all for kids understanding technology, but this is just bonkers. I mean, what kind of future are any of these kids going to have?
Well, as my son says, and I'm sure I've said this in the programme before, in 15 years' time, everybody under the age of 15 is going to have very large thumbs and won't be able to speak.
Yeah, and their eyes will be out like the huge eye. They won't be able to talk. You're absolutely right. That's the thing. Is 40% of children under 13 have a social media profile.
I can't sort of believe it. You know, it was interesting you were talking about, this was running through my head earlier when you were talking about pubs, right? You know, and how pubs have reinvented themselves. They've reinvented themselves, you know, like, you know, you can go for, you know, 1, there's good food in pubs that you didn't used to have. 2, you can go and watch, you know, football matches or sport and rugby and stuff in pubs. 3, they can have quiz nights in pubs and stuff like that, right? But, you know, if you've got a whole generation of kids that are being brought up, right, that are unable to talk to each other, what's the point of them going to the pub?
God, it's just, this is horrific. Actually, this is a terrible story. You've given me nightmares now. Thank goodness my son is older, but and I've already said to him no grandkids, so I think we'll be all right. John, we've got to take a quick break, but we'll be back in just a moment.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, this is Talk and it is Petrie, and with me John Boothman, political correspondent at the Sunday Times in Scotland. The Guardian, John, again goes with the main story is a bitter injustice. No officers will face discipline over Hillsborough. And a really rather cringy picture of President Putin there. I'm not sure if he's actually doing what they're saying he's doing, but he's got his fists ready. Russia is ready for war with Europe. Vladimir Putin has accused European powers of sabotaging peace in Ukraine and threatened that Russia was ready for war.
From President Putin says that he wants peace, but he clearly only wants peace in his term.
Yeah.
His terms, and you know that part of the issue with this, of course, is that his terms seem to be the terms that President Trump seems to favour. Zelensky again in Ireland today saying that you know, he's worried that the Ukrainians might be just kept away from the negotiating table. One of the things that was really struck me about the coverage of this on television tonight was it spoke to a number of people who live in the Donbass and you know, Luhansk and Donetsk, the two main areas there, lots of which are under Russian control. The Russians want to keep all of those bits, who said they were leaving, and this, I think, might start to become quite an interesting issue for all of the countries in Europe, including our own, that if there is a deal, right, and of course we all want to see peace, and we all want to see a ceasefire, But I think what happens then if there's a deal to all of the people who've already come here, right, who have been given leave to stay until really the war's over, what will happen to all of the people who live in the Donbass who don't want to live there anymore, and some of whom have already started leaving? What will happen to all of the people who live in the rest of the Ukraine and what's left of the Ukraine who won't feel very safe anymore? And this will be something that you can bet your bottom dollar that Donald Trump won't particularly want to deal with, but all of the countries in Europe will have to deal with. And given where the politics are in a whole load of countries, this is going to be a fascinating thing. And maybe something, if there is a deal, maybe the deal's not going to be before Christmas, maybe there's not going to be a deal for many months to come. But if there is going to be another big surge in refugees, and it will be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and it's unlikely that Putin will capitulate on what he is demanding, and that is that those lands become Russian. And America seems to be in his pocket, and that first 28-point plan was just literally Trump and Putin carving up Ukraine. Trump with his hand in Zelensky's pocket, you know, wanting all the business deals and all the money and all the minerals, and Trump wanting all the land. I mean, it's like Ukraine is not a sovereign state. It belongs to those two, and they're just chopping it up between them.
I mean, this is the sixth time that Witkoff, you know, who is really, who's Trump's envoy, but it's kind of really his mate, right, has been in Russia, got a nice wee tour along with Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and around Moscow before they began today's talks. And as you say, right, you know, they've got themselves in a situation where it looks like the deal that they're promoting is exactly what Putin wants. Putin's not prepared to compromise in any of it. And now is, you know, it will be interesting again to see what the reaction of Trump is to this. He was on telly earlier saying that he's already solved 8 wars. I still don't know how he gets up to that, and this is his 9th. You know, Russia, he will perceive as already winning on the battlefield. They claimed that they'd taken a key town today,
which they haven't. Apparently, it hasn't been verified.
But
America thinks that they're doing well.
Now that the accusation's been made, that he's ready to fight Europe, and it's Europe, right, who are the people who've been the spoilers in all of this. It will be interesting to see whether Trump agrees with that or disagrees.
Oh, it depends who he's last spoken to, doesn't it, really? And what compromat there might be.
Yep.
As we suspect there is. The Daily Mail is going with cut price royal rents under fire, as we mentioned before about Prince Andrew. The Eye, still no justice, with a picture there of the 97 who lost their lives that day 36 years ago. And the Daily Star, there's a lot of papers have got this on the front page, but not as big as the Daily Star. Holly broke rider's neck. This is Holly Willoughby, or Holly Baldwin as she was known in the court. Holly Willoughby pleaded guilty to knocking a rider off his scooter, fracturing his neck in her 25k Mini Cooper. The details of this are rather less salacious than the headlines, aren't they?
Well, yeah, I mean, and a very unusual choice for the Daily Star. I mean, it's not about aliens, and it's not about
the weather.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was interesting. I think the Daily Express is the same story, and you know, I can't quite remember what the sentence was.
She got 6 points and a fine of just over $2,000, I think, because it was a failure to indicate, apparently, and the scooter had come up beside her, and she hadn't seen him, and so turned right and knocked it, not at speed. I mean, there was no, so he came off his scooter and hit the road. Yeah, she was, I believe she was stopped at a junction when it happened, and she did stay with him and waited for the police and did all the right things. But people are determined to make this into a huge, story.
Celebrity story.
Yeah. And like I said, the details are rather less salacious. I mean, I would say that I like Holly, but again, the facts don't scream. That broke the rider's neck. He's got a fractured C2 or something. He's not like he's in a wheelchair. But
I much prefer the Star when it's got alien stories. I have to say.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I like it when they're being a little bit flippant, because actually that's what we all need right now, isn't it? This is sweet though. I'm going to go with this because we're coming at the end of the time. Back on the eye of cats and men. Pets meow. Well, cats. No other pet meows, does it? Apart from a cat. Cats meow louder at male owners because it's hard to make them listen.
I was going to say, yeah, it's probably because they get more annoyed at male owners. That's probably right, I would say.
I think that's hilarious though. Do you have a cat? Do you have
No, I don't. I just I have to say I think probably that headline in my case could be changed to
wives.
I'm glad you said that, not me. I was thinking more children, but there you go.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that it's not just cats that have to speak louder to get men to listen, but it's a very, very cute picture on the front page there. Right, and the Independent, again, that quote really has really affected me today. The whole I'm still tormented by the horror of Sarah's final hours. Just very quickly, I think we've got just about a minute left, John, but a call for a 4-day week to ease teacher burnout. Don't they get big holidays anyway?
Again, another story that kind of made me pretty speechless. The Scottish Government's gone down the same road in Scotland, and I just think this will raise an awful lot of eyebrows with people. I'm not saying that teachers' jobs are not difficult. They face big challenges and stuff. But look, the country can't continually be in a situation where people, are working shorter and shorter working weeks and still expecting to get
the same money.
More money usually than they've had before. And I still maintain that, as you say, teachers in particular, they get pretty good holidays, right? They get
they don't do too
holidays
badly,
that other people don't get.
Yeah.
And it's back to that stuff. I remember one of the things that I find different between Keir Starmer and, for example, Tony Blair, was Blair and Brown had at least a narrative, right? There were rights and responsibilities, right? That if you got something as a benefit, you were expected to give something back.
Yeah, but nowadays
right?
you can just say, I want a 4-day week, and you get it. And the parents won't get a 4-day week. John, thank you.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, and a very good morning to you. It is Petrie here, and this is your chance to talk back. And I really want to hear your views on this proposal by the Justice Secretary and Deputy PM, David Lammy, who is more than suggesting, he is telling us that he is going to take away jury service. Now, not jury service, trial by jury. So trial by jury has been a fundamental pillar of the British legal and justice system for 800 years. It was written into the Magna Carta as a way of making sure that the peasants weren't overrun by those higher up that in society. So they weren't controlled, so that they would have a say in, at least in the justice system, because you would have landlords and lords and kings and people like that who would just go lock them up, you know, put some kangaroo court, some bogus trial and lock them up. So the idea was to put ordinary people in the way of that, to make sure that justice was delivered as fairly as possible. And jury trials on the whole are successful because you've got 12 lay people there who have to understand the evidence. So the evidence has to be very clear. It has to be very well explained. It can't just be some sort of nebulous, yeah, well, we got this and, you know, just believe us, it's fine. So the bar for the police was set quite high. They had to come up with the evidence that would back up any claim. That would go through the CPS. The CPS would then judge whether the evidence was strong enough, and then it would go to a court. And it has always been your right to ask for a jury in a criminal trial, because you may think that if you look a certain way, or you have a certain skin colour, or whatever it might be, that you wouldn't be fairly treated by just a judge. I mean, even in magistrates' courts, it's not just one person where it matters. There's usually three. So they will at least talk to each other. Magistrates are volunteers. They're usually, they're chosen very carefully. They're from all demographics. They're from all different backgrounds. They're normal people like you and me. So for magistrates to deliver, and at the moment they can only deliver up to a year, I believe, in sentencing. But that will be extended to potentially 3 years, up to 3 years. So they'll have a lot more power. But in a way, I kind of trust magistrates' courts because of the background of the magistrates. Judges, on the other hand, and look, we've seen some shocking deliberations by judges. We've seen some appalling sentencing. We've seen some absolutely awful behaviour that we don't agree with as a population that has just been deliberated by a judge. Do you trust just a judge? Would you trust a judge who tend to come from a very different strata of society to the rest of us? They tend to come from quite sort of rarefied backgrounds. They're not normal people. They're not like magistrates, right? They're not chosen because they're diverse. They're not chosen because they come from different backgrounds and they've had different experiences. They've usually had the same background and the same experiences, which is a problem, I think, with justices. But I'm not saying they're all incapable of thought and putting themselves in other people's shoes, but I think a good deal of them are, and I think a good deal of them are, you know, white old men. I'm just going to say it, who probably don't have any connection, really, to the world that we all live in, and I would be really concerned that a single judge could be trusted. I'm just going to say it. I would be concerned of that there wouldn't be anybody overseeing them. I mean, at least have 3 judges, right? Or at least have a judge and 2 other people there that can look at this. And also, it hasn't been made clear whether judges will be given background information. So when you go to a jury trial, you are not told if the rapist in front of you has already been convicted of rape. You will not be told if the person in front of you is serving a prison sentence for another crime. You are just there to judge the evidence that has been gathered on the one case that you are there to judge. So you're not told, because if I was told, well, he raped somebody and has done 6 months in prison and now he's out and we're accusing him, I'd say, well, he's guilty then. He's guilty. I wouldn't be capable of looking at the evidence and judging it only on that evidence. I know I would not be capable of it, and I defy anybody to say they would. So you're not told the background to that person, so that they are only judged on that case that you are a jury on. And you only find out afterwards. You've get no, not guilty, and then you find out the guy was in prison for 6 months for rape, and you think, oh God, let him go. I've let him go. I shouldn't have done. Which proves that the evidence has got to be strong, and it proves that it is the right thing to not know what they've done before. But will judges be given that information? Because magistrates are. So listen, I just want to know if you think this is going to be safe justice. I don't want quick justice. I want efficient justice. We've got a backlog of nearly 80,000 cases at the moment. Some of them will have to wait until 29 in order to get in front of a jury. But that isn't the fault of jury trials, by the way. Jury trials only amount to 3.3% of all trials. So it's not the fault of jury trials that there's this backlog. But what worries me is this rush to speed up everything and clear this backlog almost at any cost. And what the cost will be the cost to somebody's freedom who perhaps doesn't deserve to be in prison. Having said that, there are loads of other countries that don't have juries. Working, effective democracies don't have juries. So maybe we don't need them. Maybe we can learn to trust the judges making the right decisions. Maybe we can give up juries in trials, except for the most heinous of crimes. But there are still some pretty nasty crimes that will be judged by a judge. And also, the other issue is that, say it's a fraud case, it's easier to get to one person than it is to get to 12, and to identify one person than to identify 12 who are on a jury. It's easier to brown envelope it or threaten a judge to lean one way or the other. I just don't feel I trust it. I think that one person is exposed. And 12, although you can intimidate 12, but that would be fairly difficult to do. And 12 normal people with very different life experiences can come up with pretty solid verdicts. And they do. And it has been a good system that has served us well. But have we now, we don't need it. Have we crossed a lexicon? We don't need that anymore. We need fast justice. We don't necessarily need it to be always looked over by a jury. Have you ever served on a jury? Let me know. And have you ever been in front of a magistrate? I want to know what you think about this. I want to know if you would trust this sort of third way, this just a judge sitting there deliberating on your innocence or guilt. Give me a call, 0344 499 1000. Calls are charged at national rate, but we do call you straight back. And you can text me as well, put the word talk and then your message to 87222. Maybe you think we just don't need it anymore. It's a different world now. And what was right 800 years ago probably isn't fit for purpose now. Although I quite like the safety that it puts us in between us and them. So give me a call. Let's talk to Quinn, who's in Neath. Fabulous name. Hello, Quinn.
Hello there. Are you keeping all right?
I'm all right. How are you?
Oh, I'm not doing too bad.
I'm glad to hear you're not doing too bad.
Yeah.
What do you think about this, our 800-year-old right to a jury trial being taken away?
No, we need to keep the system. I can understand what you were just saying. I can understand what you're saying. Maybe we need to adjust it. Maybe we need to look forward to what other countries have got. But we haven't got what other countries have got. They are more. What's the word? Basically, they got punishments more than we've got. We have got the old laws. We haven't got their punishments. If you were a thief and you've done something wrong, some other countries would probably take a hand off, or the wrist, because you're a thief. Or if you start like years ago, there was a case in America where a young chap goes to Hong Kong and he starts slashing scraping all the cars. So they take him straight to prison, and then they bend him over and they whiplashed him. And then when he went back home, he made a lot of money out of it. The other matter is, it's like the Darvells in the Neath area. They had bent cops, bent police, and the case was put before the court. They looked at the case, but the police itself decided to do it dirty, and they choose them and say, right, okay, we because they like innocent and no one's not going to miss them, we'll stick them in the prison. There was a case with Ireland where they arrested people, and basically they went for so many years in prison, and his father died. And then when they came out, because they found out the justice didn't do any good because there were so many bent cases. The other matter is, you've got so many politicians or so many important people that I like to mention a few names, but it's like Jim Fix-It. You had him and you had his cronies, and basically you can't just trust them. You just can't. You have one man.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Jimmy Savile, who I think that's who you're talking about, Jimmy Savile, he had all those people in his pockets. If he'd been brought up in front of a single judge,
yes,
on any of the charges that he was disgustingly guilty of, I'm pretty sure he would have got away.
Oh, yes.
Whereas if there was a jury there, they would hold him to account.
Yes. Yeah.
That's a very good point, actually.
The other point is as well that we had a councillor only about a few months ago who was standing with the protesters, an MP or something, or a councillor, and he stood up and he was showing we cut off people's heads, and he went to court. Didn't last 2 minutes. He came out and they let him go. So, the system is broke. I mean, you can say as much as you like about what they got abroad, because they are more sufficient in their laws.
Well, I mean, some of the countries that I'm talking about abroad, it's not just those, despotic states that will have corporal punishment, but France, Germany, Spain, Italy. A lot of those have a modicum of jury trials, but they will use them only for the most egregious of crimes. Some of them don't have juries at all. Germany doesn't have juries. So there's a lot of countries, European countries, that don't use juries. They've got a different way. Some people have professional jurors that are signed up for 5 years, for example, and that's what they do for those 5 years. But yeah, it's an interesting one. The thing that concerns me, I think, the most at Quinn is what you touched upon there with with Jimmy Savile particularly, is if you are that high up in society that you've got all of those. I mean, he was friends with the king, for God's sake, right?
Yeah, the king's brother or something, is it?
I mean,
he was dealing with a paedophile.
Yeah, and I mean, the Savile was the most disgusting sex offender this country's probably, one of the worst anyway we've ever seen, and the chances are if he was up in front of a judge, he would have known that judge, or at least the judge would have known his mate or whatever. That's what concerns me as well.
Well, the guy who's saying now in the House of Parliament, he turned around and said, when he was discussing this matter, I was watching a TV program earlier on, and he was judge and jury before you even discuss this, because he said you've got to find the evidence first. But he have brought it up as a judge and jury straight away on TV, saying, well, I think Nigel Farage should apologise because of this sort of case with a person went back to 50 or 60 years because of
the school racism, yeah.
Yeah, but he decided straight away, without even looking at any case, without looking at any proof, he decided, well, I said, he needs to apologise. And yet, there's, that's the beginning of it. For him to stand up on TV and say, well, he needs to apologise when he had nothing in front of him, that's the beginning of it.
Yeah, and I do think that the potential for corruption is just too big a risk, and again it will be like, I always think of American justice: the richer you are, the less likely you are to see the inside of a prison. So that's already the case in this country to some degree or other. But I think that this will make it worse, because at the moment, you and I can hold some rich, stuck-up pillock to account, right, if they've broken the law. We can do that as normal people in a jury. Who's going to hold them to account if there are no lay people, if there are no normal people looking at them and going, you did this?
Well, there was a case on about quite a few, well, I think it was last year, it's something to do with Tommy Robinson. He went outside the court and he took photographs of these people that went in for rape, and yet in a matter of an hour or two, they came out. And one of them went in with a bag, and Tommy Robinson turned around and said to him, is that bag meant for the judge for the money? Are you paying your way out? And they were walked out, they were free. Now, this person now who was in the House of Parliament was saying, oh, it's all to do with rape, I have to wait for so many years or months like that. It's nothing to do with rape. It's all to do with control and who they can protect with a bit of cash in their pockets. That's all it is. We need to keep the old system so we know that we can't prosecute the innocent. And
by the way, Tommy Robinson did break the law by taking those photographs. I would have been sent down for that. Any one of us would have been. But yeah, I'm with you. My concern is always for the most vulnerable in society, or the most picked on in society, who will have less of a voice against some, potentially posh pillock judge than they would have in front of 12 ordinary people.
Well, most people know about the Davals. There was a murder in Swansea with a sex shop, and the police couldn't find who he was, and it was got a bit corrupted, and they arrested him straight away. And basically, instead of looking into the case, and basically you arrest the wrong people and put the wrong people behind bars, and it's wrong. It's wrong. You need to get the evidence, talk about it, and then basically come to a conclusion. With those 12 people that are sitting in the background, everybody can put their heads together, and then they can come to say, well, he lied about this, or no, he said about that. They got it in front of him. They got it.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean I stand by you saying that. Absolutely, and that's the point. Is that it is that chance for ordinary people. It's not that those ordinary people always get it right, but those ordinary people are there to be a check and a balance on what we know bad people will do without us watching them. And that is the point of it. Great call, Quinn. Thank you very, very much indeed. I'm going to take a very quick break, but I will be back in just a moment. So do give me a call. Do you think that our system is robust enough to have just a judge judging you, right, with no jury there to act as 12 pairs of eyes and ears? 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This.
Hello there, and a very good morning to you. This is Talk, and it is Petrie, and this is your chance to talk back. We're talking about the, David Lammy says that the right to trial by jury will be abolished for all but most serious crimes in a chilling assault on ancient liberties. And this has been a right of ours for 800 years, written into the Magna Carta. And it is the right to have 12, well, it used to be good men and true, but it's good women and true, so lay people, stand between them and us, really. So, because it's always us that's in front of the judge, isn't it? So, because it's never them. So, these 12 people are there to scrutinise and to bring life experiences and to just not be one of them. Because what Quinn was saying was really quite right. If you imagine, and I'm so glad that he used that example, if you imagine Jimmy Savile, who was friends with everybody in authority. He had judges, he had police officers, he had blooming princes and queens in his back pocket. They were all there. He was just the most, they loved him, absolutely loved him. If he had ever been brought to a trial in his lifetime, which is, I just so wish he was. You know, when he died, he had his fingers crossed. Do you know that? They found his body with his fingers crossed because he was hoping that he wouldn't go to hell. Anyway, if he'd been brought to just in front of a judge, what are the chances, do you think, that he would have gone down for the disgusting piece of absolute excrement that he was? It's a good question, because I think he had so many people in his back pocket they wouldn't have believed it. Whereas 12 people, like you and me, sitting there, listening to the victims, listening to evidence, and not being in awe of that disgusting excuse for a human being, we might have been able to put him away. And that's what worries me, is that one person is corruptible and 12 people, it's a bit more difficult to do that, right? And one person is threatenable, and 12 people, again, more difficult to do. Would you be confident with just a judge judging you? I'm not sure I would. John is in Staffordshire. Hello, John.
Hello, Petrie. I spoke to you a couple of weeks ago about Prince Andrew.
Oh, yeah. Andrew Mountbatten, Windsor.
About his medals.
Oh, yes. Yeah, and we decided that if he'd earned it, he should keep it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
On regards to the court cases, I was also a police officer as well in my life, and I was also on the receiving end, both of putting people before the courts and being a defendant when I was a police officer.
Okay.
We used to have these things called stipendiary magistrates, who were magistrates, and they would sit on the bench as one person, and they had limited legal training. Now, I don't know if we still have them, but would that not be a good sort of like in the middle between jury and trial by judge?
I mean, we do have magistrates now, but any case that I've been to in a magistrate's court, there's not just one magistrate. There's usually three.
Yeah, but they used to have stipendiary magistrates who used to have legal training. They used to have legal training, and they used to sit on the bench by themselves.
I still wouldn't trust a single one person.
No.
I think there has to be oversight. There has to be somebody who can go, well, why do you think they're innocent? What to question it.
It's a very difficult balancing act, and personally, I think that I was dealt with by a stipendiary magistrate when I was accused of something, and thank God I was.
Did you feel you were fairly treated?
I would say I was very fairly treated, and I was treated properly. However, if I'd have had the option of going for trial by jury by my peers, I would have elected for that straight away.
Why weren't you given that?
I wasn't given it because the offence didn't warrant having having a judge.
Right, so it wasn't therefore criminal.
Yes, it was a criminal act that I was accused of.
Right.
I was accused of doing a criminal act, and I was taken to court by what's the best way to put it? I'm not going to mention the name for legal reasons, but I was taken to court by an animal charity.
Okay.
And I was accused of cruelty to an animal.
Oh gosh, I would have wanted a jury.
Well, it resulted in a 2.5-year trial, and it cost the taxpayer and people donating to charities over £50,000 20 years ago.
Blimey. And you were found not guilty, presumably?
Yes, I was initially, and then they appealed against the decision, and it had to go up to the High Court. And that was, I believe, decided upon, I might be wrong, but that was decided by 3 judges looking at it independently, and no further action was taken.
So you didn't have to go and have another a jury trial?
No, but the ridiculous thing is I attended 3 magistrates' court trials, and through various reasons, like witnesses not turning up for the prosecution, it was delayed another 6 months, and another 6 months, and then another 6 months. And the amount of stress that causes you when you've not done anything wrong in the first place, but you're accused of something, is horrendous. And it is a complete waste of tax money, taxpayers' time to fund this. So
but
we need it.
Doesn't there have to be a balance, though, between fast trials, and I understand that, you know, that the stress, so they've got to be, you know, you've got to be efficient, you've got to get people into a courtroom quickly, and you've got to, you know, let the innocent be and put the guilty away. I get that, I understand that, but isn't there a balance between being fast and being accurate?
You've got to have a balance of both. What you've got to do is you've got to have people attend court in the first place who are prosecuting somebody, and if they don't turn up, they should be punished for that, either financially or giving
or being arrested themselves. Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't say arrested, but it should reflect on the court case itself, or the person who's being tried by, you know, by the courts. But what I'm trying to say is the courts should need a complete overhaul, but I don't think we should get rid of trial by jury. I don't think you can do that because, as you say, it's written into our constitution.
Yeah.
And although I had nearly 3 years of sweating.
Well, that must have been awful.
Oh, it's absolutely dreadful. I had the press, the local press. I was in the local press's front page news for 6 days constantly.
Oh gosh.
I was on the BBC. I was in the Telegraph. I was in all the major tabloids. A couple I made the front pages of, and along with what went on with everything else, I was pursued by people who didn't have a realistic grip of what I'd actually done or what I'd actually been accused of. And I had threats to my family. I had to have a tunstall alarm, which is basically an emergency alarm in my house to protect me and my family should somebody come round. It was absolutely ridiculous. And this lasted for nearly 3 years. And it was due to the courts just taking too long.
Yeah, and I'm guessing as well that, I mean, that just sounds like my worst nightmare, but I'm guessing as well that there are a lot of people who are held on remand who are also innocent, right? Who are waiting for a trial date.
It's exactly the same.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same. Until you go to court, and I know the expression is you're innocent until proved guilty. It's not the actual case in real life.
No, you're guilty till proved innocent by the court of public opinion anyway.
Absolutely. My colleagues, my friends, and people who are new, not necessarily friends, hold you to account until you're proved innocent. And the amount of time this stuff takes to go to court is absolutely ridiculous. It's scandalous, really.
And when you were a copper, did you often put people on remand, or they were put on remand, and you knew they were innocent, or you felt that they were innocent, or you felt that that was unjust?
I'll be totally honest with you. I've never knowingly put anybody before the courts who I knew was innocent, ever.
Right.
I had good ethics when I was in the job, and I've never, ever, ever put anybody before the courts who didn't deserve, in my opinion, and in the opinion of, say, the CPS. I never knowingly put anybody before the courts that I thought was innocent.
But do you believe that some police officers do?
It's a possibility. It has happened in the past. I personally think that the force I worked for, before I finished, were corrupt in many matters. And I worked in another police force beforehand, and they were corrupt as well. So I'm not saying that the police are whiter than white, but in general, I think the police do a good job. But I can't defend the police service as being whiter than white. It never has been.
But it must be frustrating as well for the police to see, a trial date being set for 3 years away, and witnesses or even victims saying, I can't wait that long. I'm backing out now.
Yes, I totally agree with that. People get tired and they get waited out. I would express it as being waited out over court cases, and it's a physical and mental drain on people.
Yeah.
when they've got to wait that long to go to court.
It's just hanging over you the whole time, presumably. It's just there.
Absolutely.
In everything
absolutely.
you try and do.
And I can say that on the other end of the scale.
Yeah.
Having been taken to court myself, I can tell you it is absolutely, what's the word?
I can't imagine having to go through that. It just sounds awful.
When you're working in a police service and you're accused of something, we should have like an American system for the British police where it's dealt with within a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
And it's dealt with properly, but it's not left hanging, because it affects your career, it affects your private life, it affects everything.
Yeah, I literally that just sounds like my worst nightmare. The idea of being accused of something I know I haven't done and it taking so long to clear my name.
So it's got to work both ways. My main point, getting back to my main point, is I think the court system needs speeding up, where victims, the accused, need a quicker result. Because if you're sitting waiting on something happening and I say this for experience, if you're sitting waiting for an outcome for nearly 3 years, it can destroy you mentally, and it can destroy your family life, and it can destroy your social life, ... all the other things. So we need to speed things up regards court. And I'm not saying lose the quality of the evidence that's been put before the courts.
Right.
You need, or the prosecutions need the time to put a good case file together, as does the defence. But the courts need to be, for want of a better word, they need to kick up the backside, really.
I think that they've been hamstrung. They've been deliberately slowed down for some reason, that judges are not allowed to sit for any more than a certain amount of days. And I just worry that the first thing is, let's just take away another right. You know, that's always my point, is that seems to be the easiest and quickest conclusion, John, that these people come to, is right, we've got to speed this up, let's just remove something from these peasants. John, thank you very much. Fascinating, really interesting that you could see that from both sides, but that does sound pretty awful. Listen, give me a call on this. Where do you stand on jury trials? Would you want a jury, or would you be happy to be seen by a single judge? 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, and a very good morning to you. It's Petrie here with you until 1 o'clock, and this is your chance to talk back. And we are discussing the, David Lammy, the Deputy Prime Minister, who said he's going to abolish a trial by jury for all but the most serious crimes, and this author is saying in a chilling assault on ancient liberties. And he's been accused of being Putin-esque, as an assault on liberties sounded the death knell for trial by jury. It's an 800-year-old right. I can't see it clearing either house. Apparently the backbenchers are absolutely fuming about this. But defendants will lose the right to choose a jury trial in a Crown Court if they're charged with either way offences, which, if they're convicted, carry short prison sentences. So I presume if you're not banged to rights with your hand in the cookie jar, and this could go either way, you can ask for a jury. Well, you could. The future, we will not be able to ask for a jury. We will just have to sit in front of a judge. Instead, cases will be overseen by newly empowered magistrates if there's a likely sentence of up to 2 years in jail, or a sole judge in a new Crown Court bench division if they would face a 3-year term. Judges will also sit alone in complex fraud trials which require specialist knowledge and expertise to unpick. Only crimes carrying a punishment of more than 3 years will be put to a jury in the Crown Court. It means that while rape cases will be heard by a jury, some offences, including sexual assault, stalking and sharing indecent images, may not. David Lammy faces a Labour revolt, as he confirmed Labour wants to rip out an 800-year-old tenet of the British legal system by ending trial by jury, but for all but the most serious of crimes. So I've been asking, would you trust a solo judge? Would you be... I just absolutely wouldn't. I promise, I just absolutely wouldn't trust them. I like the idea of 12 ordinary people who've got some life experience that aren't them. Because it is us and them, right? It's becoming more us and them as the days and weeks and months and years pass. You know, the very rich who never see the inside of a jail cell, who can commit all sorts of crimes. We're seeing that with the Epstein files. They can commit all sorts of crimes and they never see the inside of a blooming jail. They never see the inside of a courtroom even. I mean, not that I'm suggesting that Andrew, formerly known as Prince, was guilty, but he didn't even see the inside of a courtroom because 17 million was paid, or whatever the money was. And that's what I mean. It is us and them. And at the moment, the only safety net we have is a jury of ordinary people who, by the way, will also try to hold them to account. The Jimmy Saviles of this world, who've got all those friends in high places. We would have seen through him. A jury would have seen through him, but if it had just been a judge, don't believe it. Let me read some messages for you. Gary says, I trust judges as much as I do politicians. One judge can be wrong, biased or bought. 12 random citizens are much harder to fool or corrupt, and they keep the system honest. And that's from Gary Glasgow, and I completely agree with that. Hello, Gary. Vince has said, I've been on a jury for a 6-week murder trial involving several people brought to trial for their part played in a man's violent death. I certainly made a difference being on the jury. One person cannot make a decision consistently better than 12 assorted people with different life experiences, especially seeing some of the ridiculous decisions made over the past 18 months. And that's regards Vince. And we often see it, don't we, judges making absolutely stupid decisions. Because we already do have trial without jury, by the way, it's family court. And we know that that doesn't always play out in the right way. Family courts, I think, are a disgrace. I think that I genuinely believe they are anti-democratic, and that they don't often actually make the right decisions. So yeah, I'm with you, Vincent. I'm not up for that. Joanna said, Lammy didn't have it in the manifesto. How dare he? It must be stopped. I was a prosecution witness. The guy got off because of a jury. He was taken back again for a similar crime and the jury found him guilty. He didn't get as long a sentence because it was only one case, but the system did work eventually. And that's Joanna from Salisbury. Yeah. I think that is a really, again, a really good point. And Hugh says there would be a minuscule time saving in judge-only trials. Why? Well, the judge has to listen to the prosecution and defence arguments, same as a jury would, and then at the end the judge has to withdraw to consider the evidence, just as the jury does. Time saved? Peanuts. And that's Hugh from Basingstoke, unless he's already made up his mind. And he's got previous information, which is dangerous. That's not a safe trial. Rob says, magistrates assess evidence on the balance of probability. Crown trials assess evidence beyond reasonable doubt. That's a massive difference. It's why complicated cases are referred from Magistrates' Court to Crown Court. Thank you, Rob. Brilliant point. Excellently well made. Well, I want you to hear the Justice Secretary try to justify this. This is David Lammy spoke today in Parliament about the overhaul of jury trials work.
Investment is not enough. The caseload is projected to reach 100,000 by 2028, and without fundamental change could keep rising, meaning justice will be denied to more victims and trust in the system will collapse. Mr. Speaker, to avoid that disaster, I will follow Sir Brian's bold blueprint for change. First, I will create new swift courts within the Crown Court with a judge alone deciding verdicts in triable either way cases with a likely sentence of 3 years or less, as Sir Brian recommends. Sir Brian estimates that they will deliver justice at least 20% faster than jury trials. And whilst jury deliberations remain confidential, judges provide reasoning for their verdicts in open court. So this will hardwire transparency into our new approach. Sir Brian also proposes restricting defendants' right to elect for jury trials, a practice not found widely in other common law jurisdictions. And let's be honest, it's a peculiar way to run a public service. Our world-leading judges should hear the most serious cases, and I agree that they and the magistrate should decide where a case is heard. This will prevent defendants from gaming the system, choosing whichever court they think gives the best chance of success, and drawing out the process, hoping victims give up. And I will limit appeals from the Magistrates' Court so that they are only allowed on points of law to prevent justice being delayed further. Alongside these changes, we will increase Magistrates' Court sentencing powers to 18 months, so they can take a greater proportion of lower-level offending and relieve pressure on the Crown Court. I would also take power to extend that to 2 years, should it become necessary to leave further pressure. And when it comes to exceptionally technical and lengthy fraud and financial trials, judges will be able to sit without a jury where appropriate. While these cases are small in number, they place undue pressures on jurors to sit for months, a significant interference with their personal and professional lives. These reforms are bold, Mr. Speaker, but they're necessary. I'm clear that jury trials will continue to be the cornerstone of the system for the most serious offences, those likely to receive a sentence over 3 years and all indictable-only offences. Among others, this will include rape, murder, manslaughter, grievous bodily harm, robbery and arson with intent to kill.
Livid, those people. Diane Abbott, absolutely fuming. But, like all of these politicians, we're talking about trust yesterday, weren't we? Back in 2020, David Lammy said something really quite different about juries. Have a listen.
The jury system is fundamental to our constitutional arrangement. We should not use the coronavirus as a cover to abandon juries, which is the opportunity to be judged by 12 of your peers. Juries being replaced by judges and magistrates is effectively the establishment, rather than your peers who live in your community deciding what justice should be.
Can't believe a word any of them say, can you? I mean, it is absolutely breathtaking. And on that note, I'm going to take a quick break.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
And this is Petrie, and I'm with you till the top of the hour. Just a very quick reminder that there is a podcast of this programme all the best bits stuck into an hour. So wherever you get your podcast, just look for Petrie Hosken and give it a listen. I would really appreciate it if you did, because the bosses love that sort of stuff. Anyway, back to the topic of the day. We're talking about whether you would feel safe with juryless trials. Dan has called from Warrington. Hello, Dan. Good morning to you.
Morning, Petrie. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I hope you're well as well.
Oh, that David Lammy makes my skin crawl, you know. I cannot stand that man, and he's so insincere. He lies all the time. The idea that, can we trust these judges? You know, what he said was, the most serious of crimes, right? So was Hugh Edwards and what he did not a most serious of crime? It was a very serious crime, wasn't it? And yet the judges allowed him to walk free. These judges can't be trusted, Petrie, and the jury are there almost to hold the judges to account, in my opinion.
I agree. I think the juries are really very, very important. It's not the verdict that they do so much that is important, but they are a wall between us and them. They are a defence wall again, because it is us and them. We know it is, right? And that gap is getting bigger and bigger every day. We know rich people don't see the inside of a blooming jail cell, let alone a courtroom. So we know that they avoid all in the most heinous of crimes. So at least if one of them is brought to the, in front of a judge, there's a better chance that a jury will see through that nonsense than a judge who can be swayed, who comes from the same background, possibly.
Yeah. I mean, and the idea that some people peddling that that the public aren't qualified to make these such decisions. Well, look, we have experts in every field making monumental mess-ups all the time, right?
Yeah.
Even you look at, for example, the poor baby Peter Connolly case years ago, right? Now, if there were experts there in the social services that somehow didn't see that, whereas you would, you got a few people, few people with a bit of common sense about them. Maybe, can you clean this kid? Can we have a look at it? What's going on? So I don't trust that idea that the public don't know what they're looking at either, because quite often, actually, the public are a lot more sincere about stuff. And
I agree. And the public we're a lot smarter than they give us credit for. They all think we're dumb peasants, right? We know that. They think with the political classes, the rich, they think we're dumb. And that's why you get people like Campbell's Soup saying, oh, I wouldn't eat our rubbish. Or Ratner saying, I wouldn't buy that. That stuff that I sell. They all take the mick out of us. They all think we're stupid, and we're not. And actually, it is beholden on prosecuting barristers to explain the evidence clearly, so that we do understand it. And that's actually a vital part of testing that evidence.
Yeah, and if the jury don't get it and they don't understand it and they can't come to conclusions, then they get kicked out, don't they? And there's another jury brought into place. And it's not perfect, is it, Petrie? It's far from it.
No, it is far from it. And innocent people get put away and guilty people get free on the behest of a jury. We know that. But it's a safety net.
Yeah.
I'm really concerned that this man has just arbitrarily decided, without authority, to take away an 800-year-old right that was written into the blooming Magna Carta. That's what annoys me as well, is the arrogance. And you heard him just then, saying that actually we need to keep jury service, because you can't believe a word these people say.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I cannot stand the man, and I don't know what to say, but this country is turning into such a mess, isn't it, Petrie? I don't know what to say about this, but yeah, the idea that we're going to get rid of this system, like you said, that we've had for hundreds of years, to save a bit of time and money when there's so many other efficiencies that can be put into place in all sorts of areas of our lives, and they fail to do it.
Yeah.
They fail to listen to the public all the time, and you know, and